really excited to be here, and we have an excellent set of participants today from some of the top companies making 5G happen for all of us. And what I wanted to talk about today is basically 5G infrastructure, and have opinion from our panels on different ways 5G will change the way we experience technology. So again, my name is Talluri. I'm at Micron, and I'm responsible for the mobile business. Today we have 3 panelists, and I'm just going to introduce them quickly, and then we'll have a conversation about 5G. So to my left here is Noel Kenehan. He's the VP of Technology and the CTO of the Emerging Business Unit at Ericsson. And next to Noel is Rokeya Jones. She's the Senior Principal Group Director at Microsoft. She's responsible for the 5G product strategy. And to her left is Rasmus Hellberg, Senior Director of Technical Marketing at Qualcomm. You heard from Steve today, and he's responsible for the 5G and the new technology rollout there. So welcome. I'd like to start off by just maybe having the panelists say a little bit about their background and their views on this new technology innovation in communication networks. We've seen 3G, 4G, now we're at 5G. So let's start with Noel.
Thanks, Raj. So the CTO for Emerging Business Group within Ericsson, working at the intersection of 5G, IoT, edge compute, and really looking to how do we solve problems together with partners? How do we look at the end-to-end solutions and then either create new products from our perspective or even new business models? And from an Ericsson perspective, I think just going back to some of the earlier Gs, I was in some early deployments of 3G, and we were discussing video calls. They'll never work. Nobody's ever going to make a video call. So I think we realized we're in the tech business, not the prediction business. But what we see is opening up as much as possible for almost crowdsourced innovation and for the application developers to make that innovation happen.
Awesome. Okay, from your perspective.
Hello, thank you for having me, Raj. It's great to be here. This event is awesome. I'm at Microsoft, and I work in the Azure networking organization, where we focus on creating new business and service models for what we would extend and work with our telco partners around the globe on. Recently, back in July, we released a news release about what we're going to do with AT&T, how we're going to double down and really support fixed wireless and support on-prem solutions. And for me, it's a fun world. I think we have a lot of opportunities at Microsoft in the world of 5G, specifically around always connected PCs. We recently just announced about 7 different devices in our Surface line that we're all excited about. And so there's more to come.
Rasmus?
Okay, so I've been through 2G, 3G, 4G, and then 5G. So it's been quite different each generation. So Steve mentioned before that this is the innovation platform. So what is different? So if you look at the past, each generation had a specific purpose in some sense. The better voice or the better data. It's so funny. I remember you talked about 3G video. I went to conferences in the late 90s that were looking for the killer application for 3G. It was like video conferencing, but it didn't really work out. So, and then really 4G with really good data. And then we started to add more things, IoT and other things. But we sort of added it on. So I think the fundamental difference with 5G is that we designed it from the beginning to support things we haven't even imagined, but at the same time support everything we had in the past. Obviously, we have mobile broadband. That's a killer application. We have IoT. We get these new capabilities with lower latency and ultra reliability to control things. So I think that's fundamentally different, that we have this platform now that can support what we know that we need, but we also going to support things that we have no idea what it is, because we have made it flexible in a way to innovate to things that we haven't even imagined. The other thing, 3 aspects, that's sort of a service aspect, but I think another important aspect is now included all types of spectrum. Low, mid-band, high-band, unlicensed spectrum, which means also we can look into new deployments models. It means that 5G is not going to just be deployed by traditional mobile operators. It's going to be deployed by private entity, factories, transportation hubs, and so forth. So the rise of new players in 5G is going to lead to much broader proliferation of 5G beyond the traditional deployment model.
So that's a very good point. I think whenever we talk about new technologies and new technologies coming, as you mentioned, we always like to find what's the killer application. And I think we've kind of proven over the last few generations that it's hard to predict that. I mean, the example I like to give is, I don't think anyone predicted that you put GPS in a phone, you're going to get Uber and Lyft, right? I mean, it's kind of like you never quite predicted that, but it's so essential. And of course, all the other stuff has to come together for that to happen. But at the same time, when you I guess, Noel, you or Rokeya, you guys think about 5G, and what is the killer application? Do we need one, or is it just a platform we need and good things will happen? How do you guys think about that in your life?
So, I think there's a couple of things. I think one, like I said, actually making that platform so you expose all the capabilities of the network. I think with 4G and definitely with 3G, there's a lot of capabilities that the network has that haven't really been utilized and haven't been exposed well enough to the developer community. So I think it is important that we don't decide what the innovation will be, that we have it as open as possible. But from a very concrete perspective, what I'm seeing is that 5G is sort of to industries what 4G's was to a consumer and the smartphone and so on. So I think we're going to see huge innovation and change. We have the whole industry 4.0 movement, and 5G is a very concrete part of that. So a lot of use cases around smart manufacturing, and I like the crossover between consumer and industrial. If we look at things like augmented reality, sort of having devices and having maybe a lot of processing offloaded at the edge, that's for maintenance purposes where you have an expert somewhere remote and I'm fixing a machine and I need some support, to gaming for consumers. Right. So we're going to have a lot of crossover between innovation on consumer and industrial side. So I think on this one, we'll have amazing things happening in consumer. That will always happen. Right. The industrial side is going to see an amazing shift.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, for me, I see this world as so much opportunity, not only for our companies to build great tools to support, like at Microsoft, we're really big in the enterprise space. But one thing that makes us really special is that we focus on creating tools for our developer audience. And I think, as you spoke earlier, it's all about developers being able to be them true selves, bring the innovation from diverse areas of their life, and creating something that we don't see today. And so many times we hear these things, are like, okay, drone operation, we know that that's going to be amazing. We know that's going to be an awesome thing. We know smart cities and autonomous vehicles of all kinds, whether that's a automotive car, a scooter, a bicycle. But what we need to figure out is, for me, the next generation API would be creating an application where those things can talk together. Let's see what the world looks like. And we know in our cars today, in certain cars, I have behavioral data that's being collected. Well, how does my data in my vehicle relate to my data when I'm driving a scooter? How does my data relate to when I'm driving a bicycle or riding a bicycle? I mean, I think all those things are opportunities in 5G where we can really grab that data really quickly, replicate it, and aggregate the data and come out with some real artificial intelligence that can help us in many, many ways. I mean, that's just one of the examples. And I mean, for me, I always relate back to the first time I ever fell in love with technology, and it was when I saw the Jetsons cartoon. So for me, as I design things in technology, I really look at and I compare everything that I do today to the world of the Jetsons. And if you have not seen that cartoon, it's on YouTube.
Awesome. So this is great. I mean, actually, it's nice to hear that the companies that are making 5G happen are investing in making the technology happen. Learning from, okay, there's no one killer app, but we know that if we make this technology happen, provide the APIs, provide the access, the good things will come. And I think that is probably one of the reasons why I think the 5G rollout seems to be happening so much faster than either 4G or 3G rollout. I think that's very interesting. So let me shift gears a little bit. What do you guys think are, maybe the key challenges, or one of the, what needs to be solved in the next, 12 months to 24 months to really make this happen? I know 5G networks are coming and chips are launching. Let's start with you, Rasmus.
Okay, so I mean, what has been solved is solved in phases, because you cannot do everything from the beginning. So the most urgent need is enhanced mobile broadband for smartphones. So that's what's happening now. And I would say that problem is solved. I mean, it's about rolling it out and expanding coverage and getting a better user experience for consumers. But that's sort of the bread and butter that we used to do. And the bigger challenge is sort of this next phase of 5G. Obviously, that solution is going to go to new industries too, and to new devices. You mentioned laptops and so forth, modules in industry and so forth. But that's what we have done sort of in 4G already, but it's a better experience. The second phase of 5G is coming a little bit later, is the challenge where we bring into new industries and new use cases and new deployment types, like smart transportation with direct communication between cars and infrastructure, but also the industrial IoT with control of mission critical things, where you bring in this new link that has 6 nines reliability and sub-millisecond latency to control things, and like AGVs and so forth. So, but that's sort of the next phase in the evolution, and we still have things to do there. And I think going back to the application, I think what's interesting here is that now we have this ultra reliable in some sense, or high capacity, reliable link at least, and then can we do new things we haven't been able to do before? And that goes back to the discussion this morning with Steve and others about distribution of functionality. We're always going to make the devices as good as possible, but now with this 5G link, we can also distribute functionality, compute, rendering, and so forth over the 5G link, and augment what you do on device. And one good example is what we call split rendering for augmented reality or extended reality or virtual reality, whatever you want to call it. So that is an interesting opportunity to innovate too, to how you distribute compute, memory, storage in general. And that goes back to the discussion about we had with the collider in CERN, that even if you have this link that has a lot of capacity, it doesn't mean that we should send back all the data. So an interesting aspect here is too, is also how you distribute intelligence, and how do you extract valuable information at the end devices, on the device, and send relevant information back, so you don't send everything back, and it cannot scale if you do it that way. And there's other reasons why you would do that too. It's also for privacy and personalization reason, because you don't want all private data to be sent back. So this whole concept of distributing compute, processing, storage, and so forth is going to be an interesting area for 5G to create new applications and services.
Interesting. So your point is, when you get that much bandwidth, and those kind of real-time low latency, how does the compute paradigm shift is a problem that we need to kind of between the edge and the network. What is in the edge, what's in the network? We need to rethink that. But okay, your point. How does software and Microsoft, people like companies, help manage that?
Well, I mean, I think it's for me the biggest challenge that I see is around financial transactions. We talk about sharing the world. In my mind, we're a matrix. We're already living in the matrix. Personal lives, we're living in the matrix, and now we're creating, with all of our enterprises and partners, we're creating another matrix. And when the complexity comes in, people want to get paid. And I spoke to you earlier, and I was talking about the whole evolution of not only our networks, but what are our users wanting to see? I mean, users are very smart. I asked a question to my kid the other day. I was talking to them about a potential API that I said, well, how much would you pay for this? You think the kids will pay for this in the future? He's 11. And he told me, he said, no, why would I pay? And I said, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, I'm giving you information. Now, this came from an 11-year-old, which tells me that, you know what? He's onto something. And he's onto something in more ways than we can really think, because just as much as we're looking at how much money we pay, all the compute for the memory, everybody needs to get paid. Well, if the users are necessary for us to run our networks, we have to look at a different way of sizing up and monetizing what we're doing.
Different business models, different way to monetize.
Absolutely. So I think that financial transactions is going to be a real true I know it's a headache for me in the business now.
So another question that comes up in 5G, and I have to ask you guys all the tough questions because they ask me when I go out there. It's like you get this tremendous bandwidth between the network and the edge device. Do we really need that much computation, the edge device? Do we really need that much memory? So I guess as people who build these networks, how do you guys feel about this, cloud versus client partitioning of compute and memory and storage as you get these high bandwidth networks?
So I think one of the things with 5G, and Rasmus, you touched on it a little bit earlier, with 4G you could do really fast things, you could do low latency things, there's lots of different things you can do. With 5G you can do all of those things in parallel to an extent that you couldn't have done before. So I think this ability to have billions of not very smart IoT devices and then amazingly high bandwidth, low latency critical applications in the same network, in the same cell at the same time, hugely important. So I see that on the sort of distribution from edge. I think we will have an amazingly rich mix of not very smart devices that I can now offload and have next generation experiences with because I have all that, I have very low latency in edge compute and I can render at the edge. Right. But you're not going to stop developing devices. So we'll continue to have, but I think with the devices that are the smartest devices today, we can get longevity from those devices by being able to put new applications that maybe you don't have the processing and storage on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's quite similar. I do think we're going to have so many devices in our possession. I mean, right now, on average, every user in every household has about at least 3 to 4 devices that's connected. I see that the new world will bring opportunity for us to prepay for the compute that we will need. That compute will then be distributed across all of our devices for use, and applications will be spread across those devices for use at any given point. I mean, we'll have to come up with some way to really containerize the data that we're using. Also, to carry on our security keys. I mean, security is big for this, right? Like, we talk about it like it's all security behind the scenes, but really when we expose this bandwidth and we expose the intelligence that we need across our networks, we can't forget about security, and it's going to be, I think, up to the users to define what type of security that they want. Now, yes, I'm probably thinking a little far out, but for me, that's my job.
Awesome. Rasmus, how do you guys think about edge versus cloud?
Oh, I thought you asked about bandwidth before. But the edge.
Yeah, because the bandwidth is so high. Yeah. What do you need at the edge versus what do you need versus the cloud? Because there's arguments to be made that have such high bandwidth.
I think I touched it, but then a little bit, because you need, I think generally, obviously, one of the big benefits of 5G is lower latency. You can get extreme low latency. So for consumers, obviously, the human perception is maybe, I don't know, 14, 15, 20 milliseconds or so. So sub-millisecond doesn't really matter. But with machines and things, it really matters. But the only way then to get that kind of low latency is to move the control and everything out to the premise, right, for instance, at the factory. So in that case, of course, you would move all the control very close to the devices and the machines, and also cloud computing and analytics. We had that discussion earlier in panels here because you want to have privacy and security. So in that case, it has to go very close to the end, basically where the devices are. But for other use cases, you can have it further in the network. But generally, you have to move compute, storage, and control closer to the user to get this low latency. So then if you look at other use cases like this, what I talked about before, split rendering, when you augment your virtual reality with rendering in the cloud, then you can have a little bit longer latency, but not too long, because you can do some tricks on the device that you do some correction for your pose in the last minute, but you get some augmentation by the process by the cloud. So I think it depends. So obviously, it depends on the use case. In some case, you have to have it right at the device, basically, to run the control. Some other use cases, you can have the cloud or the processing a little bit further in the network. For some, that's not really delay sensitive at all. Of course, you have the central cloud as you have today. So it's going to be a distribution of different things. And in that world, still, it's going to be important to have on-device processing as well to make sense of the world and also send what is relevant. Even if you have this huge bandwidth, it doesn't mean we can send everything back to a cloud or edge cloud to make sense of it and send it back. And there's various reasons to do that. And one is security and privacy.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the time, when we started this, there's this one mainframe and all of us had punch cards and we said all the computation is out. And then come the PCs and everything is distributed. We don't need any mainframes. And cell phones come in and there's all this data structure, network in the back. And now we talk about it seems like it's a cycle that goes up and down. And, as you build more smarter devices, you put more in the cloud and vice versa. So it's really interesting times. But quickly, wrapping up thoughts on this. Let's say we had this channel, let's say we had this panel, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years from now. What would surprise you, if we came back and said, wow, we didn't think about that? Let me ask you a tough question here.
Well, so I think autonomous is an interesting area that I think there's when you think about 5G, we will see autonomous happening, I think, in more constrained environments and so on. I think there's a lot of potential with the networks being built out for that to be broader. So I think that taking off more quickly and sort of spurring on that autonomous would surprise me a little bit, but I'd be hopeful.
Okay.
I think for me, what would surprise me is if we made enough progress so fast enough that we needed to see homes being network sites or homes being base stations for our relay on our data packet switching. I mean, I think when you think neighborhoods, those neighborhoods are going to need that to contain the bandwidth that they have. We talk about the different movies being downloaded in less than a second. And in a neighborhood, there's X number of kids, they're watching.
Whole thing gets one.
Correct. So I think if we get there in 2 years, I'd be really surprised.
and happy.
Even if we were to open up the door where we allowed homes to be home sites and then also create new revenue streams of income for individuals around the world.
Interesting. How about you, Rasmus?
You said what will surprise me too.
Like if you predict this is what is going to happen, and we have this panel 3 years from now, you're going to be like, we should have thought of that.
Yeah,
and in a good way or a bad way.
If I knew what's going to happen and we hadn't thought about it, I probably wouldn't be here because then I would.
Sure. But you wouldn't be surprised either.
I would be working on it. No, I think it's surprising. I think 5G is going to surprise us thanks to all this new capability that we did it differently this time. We designed it to be sort of something that we can add something we didn't think about. So that's the key thing here. Like we have an example when I worked with LT, we tried to add some features, but then it screwed up other features because you added on top of it. So now the whole idea is that you can add something here and the existing application should work as they are. So what we will be surprised with maybe then is that we add this new thing, we don't have any clue what it is, because we know that we can add it. So that then we can have this true innovation platform for future services.
Awesome. So great conversation. I think we're out of time. I really want to thank all three of you for spending time here and wonderful conversation. You're all experts in your own field and hope you guys found it useful. Thank you.
Thank you.